Hello, and thank you for watching another edition of ARFCOM News, your weekly injection of all the pew-pew news that's fit to scoop. We have a lot to cover this week, including a Czech proposal that would give them their own Second Amendment, Bloomberg buying elections, and this old-timey thing called a newspaper, possibly doxing New York gun owners. But first, a word from the folks who make this possible. If you like seeing stuff more than not seeing stuff, take a look at our sponsor, TNVC.com, your source for quality night vision gear to make you the bump in the night. Did you ever want to get your hands on a Taurus so bad you could just steal one? Me neither. But 5 classy lads have been arrested in West Columbia, South Carolina for stealing, count them with me, 1, 2, 3, 4 Taurus pistols, as well as a Springfield Hellcat, a Ruger LC9, and a Magnum Research 1911. UPS security called Lexington County Sheriff's Department when they became aware that guns were going missing from a UPS hub, and investigators charged the 2 men they believe planned the theft with criminal conspiracy and all 5 men with breach of trust. I don't know what the details of the plan were, but I'll bet you the investigators must have caught a lucky break, because it's not like the packages were meticulously tracked through an automated system with logging and timestamps for every single location, allowing for easy correlation with detailed video records. I mean, if this theft had taken place at a company that specializes in detailed tracking and efficient movement of parcels with near perfect accountability, I could understand why they got caught, but I assume the UPS hub is just a darkened aircraft hangar with an enormous random pile of boxes in the middle and no video surveillance. Before the virus and police brutality demonstrations, several prominent politicians went hard on authoritarian control freak policies, with some even trying to outdo each other for more draconian positions, culminating in Joe Biden echoing Francis Beto's threat to come for our AR-14s. But after the nation's peace was shaken and millions of people were reminded of the razor edge that a free and civilized society teeters on, those comments aged like milk. And a new poll from Harper indicates gun control really is a loser political issue. Of likely voters, fewer than 40% thought passing new laws would have an immediate impact on gun violence. More than half oppose bans on semi-auto firearms, and most acknowledge the primary reason to own a gun is for defense. The new normal has produced a sea change in the way normal people view guns. More to the point, it has changed the way most people view the role of privately owned arms in the big picture. Civil unrest is scary, but it scares the powerful more than it scares us. And a lot of people suddenly woke up to how terrible an idea it is to give the state a monopoly on violence. We've reported several times on how every month this year has smashed gun sales records for previous years. It should come as no surprise the number of background check denials has likewise increased. Duh, right? But billionaire oligarch Michael Bloomberg's puppet advocacy group Everytown is positively clutching its collective pearls over that fact. It is true the National Instant Criminal Background Check System processed almost 24,000 denials in March of this year, which is an enormous increase from the 9,500 denied in March of last year. But the percent of the total checks that resulted in a denial was 1.16% in March of 19 and jumped to a whopping 1.61% in March of this year. So a 0.45% increase in the rate of denials, which actually sounds pretty low when you consider that fully 40% of the sales were to first-time gun buyers. It's not remotely surprising that some of these people are discovering for the first time that all those gun control laws they used to support actually apply to them too. So yeah, there is a small but measurable increase in not just the number, but the rate of NICS denials. What I can't figure out is how Everytown thinks that number supports their position. Are they trying to make the point that background checks don't work? But be prepared for a wave of emotional pearl clutching as Bloomberg attempts to impose his will on the election by funneling $60 million through Everytown for gun safety. That might sound like a lot of money. I mean, it's a colossal amount of money for mere plebes like us, but Richie Rich spent almost $1 billion on his own failed presidential campaign, which died quicker than a batch of sea monkeys. Hey, he won the Guam caucus though, so that's something. That doesn't stop advocates of a state monopoly on violence from proclaiming Bloomberg's AstroTurf group spent more on campaigning than the NRA. They still think the NRA is their strongest opponent. We'll just let them go on thinking that. And honestly, I don't think their spending really hurts us. It is as though Americans are waking from a long sleep and becoming aware of their right and duty to be responsible for their own destiny and the critical role that guns play in self-determination. This really isn't the best time to be reminding them of which candidates want to further entrench racist power systems and impose a state monopoly on violence. Never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. Speaking of mistakes, the Daily News seems to be poised to dox legal gun owners in New York City. Last week, a judge approved their request to compel the NYPD to release the name, zip code, and license category of all persons to whom NYPD granted a firearm license during calendar year 2018. We don't know yet what the Daily News plans to do with that information, but the only interest they could possibly have is to publish it. Whether they're just interested in confirming a certain person or group possesses a firearm license, or whether they're planning to publish the list in its entirety, I can't say, but if it's the latter, that certainly feels aggressive and like it would be intended to intimidate. But what people often forget is that lists like these work in both directions. I predict that if the Daily News doxes New York gun owners, within a day or two, we'll see a cross-reference list of Daily News staff who don't appear on that same list. On the other hand, there's a decent chance the request is part of an investigation of New York government corruption. Remember, this is a list of people who were able to obtain the Crown's favor to own a gun in the holiest of authoritarian holies, New York City. The only people likely to be on this list are the wealthy and connected. Regardless of the use to which the Daily News intends to put this information, the list might shine the sanitizing light of truth on the corrupt bureaucracy of New York. And hey, we can make our own lists. The Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms has published a list of companies and senior leadership who have instituted policies that infringe on civil rights or have lobbied for authoritarian laws. We'll link in the description, so be sure to take a look over the list and keep it in mind when making financial decisions. You can't be expected to make every single purchase only after carefully weighing every social policy position communicated by every company, but voting with your wallet is an important part of the process. And even more effective than just deciding not to eat at Burger King is to email the individuals on that list and explain to them why you have chosen not to do business with them or why you have decided not to include them in your portfolio. And before we move on, I have one more item from New York. I promise I am not going to do an entire episode on the stupid crap coming out of New York, but they really set the standard for authoritarian fertilizer. The New York State Senate just passed their ghost gun ban. Blah, 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 can't stop the signal, blah, 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 what's the point? Something totally ineffectual. You folks have heard me rail against stupid ghost gun bans in the past. In my book, gun control laws break down into two categories: well-intentioned but unconstitutional infringements and totally pointless infringements. Ghost gun bans fall into that second category. To be sure, ghost gun is a term as malleable as the control freaks want it to be, but the whole point of the concept is that it's a gun they can't track. And the way that's often done is by finishing an 80% lower or printing a receiver. I have covered ad nauseum how easy it is to build a gun. Any idiot can make a shotgun from $20 worth of plumbing supplies. People have bolted together AR lowers from slabs of metal, and a couple of weeks ago, I told you about an AR lower made out of Legos. There is simply no way to enforce stupid laws like this. What's worse is they know they can't enforce it. They know full well crooks won't pay any attention to laws like this, or in any other gun law for that matter, and no amount of ineffectual bleating will change that. So stop what you are doing right now and pause this video so you can call 518-455-4100 for the New York State Assembly switchboard. If you live in New York, the operator can help you find your representative. If you don't live in New York, there's still no reason you can't pick a representative to speak with. Tell them this ban is stupid and ineffectual. Tell them it is the height of government hubris to believe it is possible to silence an idea, and the only people who will be intimidated into complying are the sort of people who are mostly harmless anyway. Tell them you intend to vote against them in their next primary if they even hint at support for this awful bill. As always, be kind and courteous to the person taking your call. For all you know, they may agree with you, and you don't need to convince that person anyway. Just give a concise statement on your position and wish them a pleasant day. Now, maybe I'm guilty of preaching to the choir, but I believe the right to keep and bear arms is one of the most fundamental human rights. The right to be armed follows naturally from the right to be alive and to do as one wishes. A man can't really be free of his neighbor's coercion or the tyrant's whims unless he is armed. Without that power, you're not really free no matter how large the fence is drawn around you. You are still only just so free as what you are allowed to do. Bearing arms is therefore arguably the most fundamental of human rights, as important, if not more important, than the right to free expression. The right to bear arms is not granted by the U.S. Constitution. It is a human right seized by our ancestors through blood sacrifice and enshrined by its recognition in the Constitution. And that's why my heart brims with joy to see the Czech Republic may adopt a constitutional amendment affirming the right to bear arms and to defend life using a weapon. Because gun rights are human rights. Can I get an amen? If passed by a 60% majority, this amendment would be serendipitously the second amendment to the Czech Republic's Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. The Czech Republic is already one of the least oppressive places on the planet to own firearms. You do need a government permission slip, but it shall issue for Czech citizens and citizens of NATO member nations. So if it goes all pear-shaped here, add that to your list of bug-out locations. Dr. King said a right delayed is a right denied, and his position is supported by the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. In 1943, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania established that a state may not impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the U.S. Constitution. So why, in the name of Alderaan, does the state of Illinois think it has any business requiring a government permission slip at all in order to own a gun, let alone delaying firearms owner ID cards for months? And they can't blame it on the Wu flu either. This has been going on for years. My personal opinion is that public servants who deny civil rights under color of law should be removed from office and rode out of town on a rail, never to hold government jobs ever again. But the Second Amendment Foundation and the Illinois State Rifle Association have hired a team of lawyers to sue the Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly and Illinois State Police Firearms Services Bureau Chief Jessica Trame personally in their official capacities. I'm saddened by the knowledge that neither Trame nor Kelly are likely to face any personal consequences for their actions, but hopefully the court will compel them to at least comply with the state law's requirement of processing applications within 30 days. If you would like to help fight government oppression, please consider donating to the SAF and ISRA. We'll put donation links in the description and the URLs on the screen right there. A new study published by UC Davis indicates Americans bought too many guns earlier this year. Now I know it's rather unusual to hear such an anti-liberty position espoused by an institution such as UC Davis, but the facts are undeniable. They studied the same figures I've been reporting to you for months and reached the inescapable conclusion that we bought too many guns. Shame on us. Hang your heads. I wasn't able to determine from their study what amount of freedom they believe is just right, or whether there is a minimum amount of blasters that we ought to buy, but it was definitely too much because reasons and concern. Critics have pointed out the paper isn't peer-reviewed or published in any journal. The data from the gun violence archive used to arrive at their conclusion is not remotely transparent, and that it is absolutely farcical to attempt to draw any causal relationship whatsoever, but that won't stop the usual supporters of an authoritarian police state from citing this paper in Bloomberg-sponsored propaganda. How many times have I said that name this episode? This is Officer Toni McBride. She's a competitive shooter and rubs shoulders with celebrities training with Terran Tactical on the same range on which Keanu Reeves trained to be John Wick, peace be upon him. Officer McBride was involved in the fatal shooting of a man armed with a box cutter back in April. Why are we reporting on this now? Is it because some new evidence has come to light illustrating yet another example of racist police brutality? Did Internal Affairs uncover some wrongdoing? Nope. McBride's shooting certainly looks from all angles to be justified. An armed man is high on meth and approaching the officer when she determines she must use deadly physical force to stop him. As many of you are aware, a person armed with a sharp weapon can close with and deliver an ultimately fatal strike, even if they are shot several times. You'll note that when McBride shoots the man, he gets up again. Pistols aren't magic wands, and people don't just turn off like they do in the movies unless a bullet causes damage to the central nervous system. So if that man had decided to charge Officer McBride, he absolutely could have closed the distance and severed her femoral or carotid arteries, even after sustaining several bullet wounds to the torso. So, why am I reporting on something from back in April that looks to be a regrettable and unfortunate, but also rather unremarkable shooting? Because the family of the tweaker who took a box cutter to a gunfight has sued McBride for, number one answer still on the board, being too good a shot? Survey says, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, the lawsuit claims McBride violated the man's civil rights because she should have found other ways to de-escalate, and argues that being a competitive shooter made her more dangerous somehow. For the record, let's just take a look at McBride absolutely slaying targets with Terran Tactical. And this is the video the LAPD published on their own YouTube channel. Don't ban me. I want you to notice how much more careful and measured McBride's shots were. This wasn't a range, and it wasn't a game, and Officer McBride clearly understood the gravity of the situation. She fired carefully and with immense control so as to minimize risk to bystanders and private property. And I would argue that precision and control was indeed possible only because she had trained so hard. I also want to note the transparency LAPD has demonstrated by publishing the body camera and witness video should set the standard for all agencies, and the only area of improvement I can see is to publish earlier. So what lessons should the layperson take from this? None. Absolutely none. Except that people will sue over literally anything. No matter how restrained you are, no matter what you do, if you discharge a firearm in defense, there is always the possibility of a lawsuit. Researchers at Purdue University have discovered 2 new compounds that could be used to manufacture lead-free primers, which would be a lot more noteworthy if lead-free primers weren't already widely available on the market. It's great to have more choices out there, and science is cool just for science's sake, but this US Army-funded project really seems to me like a way for Purdue to get some of that sweet government cheddar, because this just doesn't seem to solve any extant problems. Or am I missing something? I know the DoD was unhappy with the quality of lead-free primers available a decade ago, but I assume that was just an issue that could be solved by refinements to existing technologies and quality assurance techniques. I'm not a chemist, so maybe there was some fundamental problem with the compounds they've been using for the lead-free primers that were already available. Do any of you folks know? Can you square me away? This process really is participatory, and I learn a great deal every time you folks post. So please stay engaged and hold me accountable. If I make a mistake, I want to know about it so I can correct it, or hide it appropriately. I hope you enjoy watching as much as I enjoy making these videos. If you want to help us keep bringing you this style of content, and you don't want to see YouTube fade into a featureless gray paste of mediocrity, be sure to engage with this video and videos from all the other gun tubers. If you want to support us more directly, please consider supporting our sponsor, TNVC.com. And as a special thank you to the stubborn SOBs who stuck around all the way to the end of this video, the first person to post, "You know I keep that MF thang on me," in the YouTube comments gets a free t-shirt from our Teespring store. I love you.